Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Olivia, and we're so glad you're here today.
Hi there, sister.
Hello, hello, hello.
The three hellos every time kills
Every
me.
time. It's my thing.
How are you doing today?
We always talk about our lunch here. I had a chopped salad for lunch from the deli, which we talk about our deli a lot. We are diehard deli people.
Carl's, shout out to Carl's.
You know you're from Long Island if your deli people like know you by name and know your order. And I had like a classic. It was so good. I had ranch dressing on my salad, and our generation who grew up in the early 2000s of diet culture was so afraid of salad dressing. Like we were told, like, remember they used to say, like, put it on your fork and sprinkle it over, the salad. And I'm like, I'm done with that. So I had a really good salad with ranch dressing, and I didn't even finish it.
You know what I'd also like to say? I'm really tired of salad being positioned as a healthy option. It can just be an option. You can just want to eat a salad. I hate when people are like, oh, adding that dressing makes it 17,000 calories. I don't care. I want a salad. Imagine a world where I actually want to eat that. I'm not hurting myself every time I eat a salad. Sometimes I'm joyously eating a salad.
Exactly. So I had a delicious salad.
Which kind of gets us to our guest today about like being joyous and embracing like whatever you want, and having the right services and
actually why we know the guest today is that our guest today is the fantastic Christine Borst, Dr. Christine Borst, who we work with her. I started working with Christine almost 4 years ago on my binge eating. And that is how I found her. And I actually found, we talk about this in the episode, but we met on Instagram long before 4 years ago, because our oldest children are the same age. And I was desperate to find a community online, and she was a new mom at the same time I was. And and she is a professor, doctor, therapist, and coach. And at the time she was habit coaching, and that's how I met her to help with my binge eating. And yeah.
Now she's also a children's book author, a creator, an artist.
Yeah. Entrepreneur. Yeah.
Entrepreneur, an adult poetry book author.
Yeah.
And by adult, I do mean adult. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah. It's a little naughty. And we adore her. She has changed both of our lives. And she, when you go to therapy, you don't know the therapist's story. No. And this was the first time we really dug into her personal journey and her fresh starts, and she made us both cry, even though we know the story of how she met her husband. It's one of the most beautiful meet cutes out there, and we both were tearing up listening to it yet again.
Yeah, it was wonderful, and we're so excited to share it with you.
So please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to A Fresh Story so that we can share more stories with the world. Enjoy Christine's episode. Let us know what you think. Christine Borst is a professor, licensed therapist, habit coach, artist, wife, and mom of 3. She's the podcast host of Alchemy of the Heart and children's book author of many books, including For the Love of Organs, a quasi-educational collection of poems, which we love, Us, an Introduction to Pronouns, and Colorado Springs from A to Z. And most importantly, we work with Christine, and we love her, and we are thrilled that she is here today with us.
So Christine, here. Yay! We're so excited. We've been looking forward to this. It's also the first podcast that we're recording after the new year, and it's like perfect to kick you off, to get out with you. So we'd love for you to tell us, what's the story of your fresh start?
Sure. So my first question is, which fresh start? You want my relationship fresh start or my career fresh start?
I like how you turned it around. It's like a therapy session.
I know. You're like, no, today you're talking.
Whatever feels right for you. I mean, they kind of intersect, I think, a little bit, right?
Yeah, they do. I guess we can start way back when. This feels like such an OG fresh start because it was so long ago. So I got married right after college, and over time I've tried to think through that and untangle that a lot, professionally and personally. And I I'm thinking, what on earth was a 22-year-old thinking getting married, right?
Yeah.
And not even, I didn't grow up in a religious household. It wasn't like if you move together, you know, you have to get married. In fact, I think my parents would be like, no, please don't. Like, no, it's cool. It's cool. You don't have to. But I think that I felt like such a perfectionistic sponge that I just took every rule that anybody had ever made for anyone, not specifically directed towards me. And I'm like, well, I'm going to follow it. Right. I'm going to follow it. I'm going to be good. That's where my worth comes from. And so I did, I got into grad school and it was like, well, we finished college. So are we breaking up or are we getting married? It wasn't that explicit. So, you know, naturally we got married at 22 years old.
Did that come from you or did that come from you together? Were you pushing it?
God, this is a great question. I'm sure he would have
It's a question you've asked me for sure.
Yeah. Ooh, the tables have turned. My guess now, like from 37-year-old me looking back, is we both had reasons, right? Like we were both trying to get out, or not trying to get out, but just do the thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, and possibly me driven, I don't know, right? Like, let's do this. I feel like I was more driven in general. I had a goal. I'd gotten into grad school. So it's like, okay, let's go.
Right. And I think a lot of culturally, right, we're told like you go to college, you find a husband, you get married, you have babies. That's kind of the trajectory.
So young,
isn't it? Well, and that was like I had heard my parents' story. They got married after college, and I was like, oh well, that's just what you do. I never stopping to question: is this what I want? Is this what's for me? I think at this point too, I had been a serial monogamist, which you know, even I was watching Sex Lives of College Girls, the new season the other day, and I was like, oh my God, I did it wrong. Like I did college wrong.
Yeah.
I should have had more fun. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. I have way more fun, I think, as a 37-year-old than I ever would as an 18-year-old. But I think, yeah, I just had all of these expectations for myself that I never even questioned or challenged or realized at that point in my life.
Yeah.
So we got married. And I remember the morning of the wedding, he had called and he was at the hotel and he's like, oh, I can't do this. And I went over, I'm like, stage fright. It's thinking all of that stuff. And then it was like, oh, no, in hindsight, no, he meant he couldn't he couldn't get up in front of people. It's that he couldn't get married.
Yeah.
Didn't make that super duper clear the morning of the wedding, but here we are. It's fine. So I start grad school, we get married, move, I start grad school as a therapist to become a couple and family therapist. And a lot went down, I think. And I got to the point that I realized, okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And I committed. And so I guess this is my life. I guess this is what I'm going to do until I die. And I made my bed, so I'm going to have to lie in it, right? Like I made my choices. And that was my plan, guys. Like that, I was like, okay, I'm committing to this. And just slowly dying inside every day, right?
Is that part of the perfectionism that you have too?
Yeah, right. Because God forbid, I mean, I can't change my mind. You don't change your mind, you know.
Well, then you'd be a fool. Then people would say something. They'd think you were, you know.
Oh my God, right? And like I kept thinking nobody in my family's ever been divorced. Like I can't be the first. It just all of this stuff. And this is not coming from anywhere. Like nobody is sitting and telling me this. And it was just so internal. And I just was like, okay, well, this is what it is. Here we are. And of course, quickly eroding inside. On top of like an intense grad school schedule, I was working multiple jobs on top of it. It was insane. And I was fine with that. I said, well, okay, here we are. This is life. And I mean, I think a lot of stuff went down during that, I don't know, 18 months or something. Not even, you guys.
You were so young. I mean, you were so young.
My frontal lobe was not even developed.
I was about to say.
Right. And I'm just like, no.
The idea that you're an adult coming out of college is so insane. Like you're in high school, you have a curfew, you have this, that. Then you go to college, you're in this very protected environment. Most people, you know, if you go away to college, you're in a dorm, you're like living with your friends. It's completely false. It's not the real world. In the summers and the Christmas, you go home, you probably still have a curfew. You know, there's still rules in your parents' house. And then you graduate and they're like, well, time to get married and have babies and get a job and where's your 401k? It's like, that's still a child. In every single way, it's still a child.
Yes. And I was thinking too this morning, it's like, we put too much emphasis on 20-year-olds, like people in their 20s, to have life figured out.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Even
yeah.
from, you know, asking high schoolers, okay, well, what are you going to major
What do you
in?
want to be?
Oh my God. Why should you know that? Like, go to college and figure out what you
Yeah.
don't want to be or who you know, whatever.
Right.
But your 20s, I am rereading Big Magic by Liz Gilbert because she is amazing. And just thinking about all of the things that she went through in her 20s, I was like, yes, that's what 20s should be for, right?
Yeah.
Like exploring and figuring yourself out and screwing up, making mistakes. Oh my God, right? So that is the opposite of what I did, right? And I didn't come from a strict household. I remember my mom gently teasing me because I was an RA in college. And she's like, I can't believe you're in college and you have a curfew. Like I feel like I just, like I said, absorbed every rule that ever existed and put them on myself. And it wasn't from anywhere.
I have a question about that though, because you have ADHD. And was it diagnosed back then?
No, not until my doc program.
Right. So was there maybe a pull and push thing happening there where there was a intense hyperactivity of thoughts and goals, and so in order to control a little bit of the situation, the perfectionism tried to overcome the ADHD hyperactive thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. And I think having undiagnosed ADHD and being fine, I'm smart, it's fine. Like I read social cues. I got through school, no problem. I had my little tricks. I would speak up first in a class discussion because then I'd get my points and wouldn't have to worry about tracking the conversation, right?
Yep.
Things like that. But then I would internalize all the shame.
I
right?
did that too. Yeah.
I would internalize it. Like, why can't I remember things, or why can't I follow the conversations like other people, or whatever? But I just, you just write it off as, okay, well, I suck and here it is. Even thinking, even as a therapist, I thought of ADHD as something that like hyperactive little boys had, and so getting diagnosed was a game changer, especially because there are times, obviously getting married at 22 feels a little bit like an impulsive decision. It's not like we ran away and eloped or anything, but still there was, I think I took these guidelines and put them in place for myself because I was afraid, like, what if they don't exist? Like, how out of control would I be if they weren't there? Right.
Yep.
So at some point I'm like dying inside and my friends are noticing, and I had a great group of friends and from grad school, and two of them I literally Marco Polo with all day, every day still. They are the best. And so being in that space and that safe space with those people who now were suddenly more aligned with who I was becoming. And this is also at the time in my life I'm starting to learn about things like manifesting and law of attraction and all of that. And it was like, okay, I feel things shifting. And also I'm dead inside. And also it was a very rigorous grad program. And so like stress was just coming from all angles. And I remember this is maybe after a year and some change. I remember my mom saying on the phone, she's like, you don't have to stay. And I said, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Everything is phenomenal. It's great, right? Because you don't complain about your husband either. Like you don't, I don't know where, I think I'm a reincarnated 50s housewife or something. I have no idea, but it was, you just didn't. But of course, I mean, moms know. She's like, no, girl, like, so, I don't know how this actually went down, but in my memory, it's like, I think I walked into my condo then and was like, yeah, we're done. I can't do this anymore. Like I said, this isn't working. Let's go to therapy. And he said, no. And then he's like, well, I don't believe in therapy. And I was like, oh, okay, so are we allowed to swear? I don't
Yes,
ask.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Encouraged. You're
Okay,
encouraged to
thank
swear.
you. I meant to ask at the beginning, but here we are. It's like I've been working my ass off around the clock to become a therapist, and you don't believe in therapy? What? So then I don't even think there was this. It was so weird how like it just was. You would think there would be more, right? I remember thinking if I threw his Xbox off the porch, I would have gotten a bigger reaction than me saying, this isn't working. Like, I can't make it work, and then a couple weeks later, he was like, okay, I'm ready. And I'm like, no. That's not how this works. We're done, right? We're gone. And so there were a lot of times though, that I would have gone back had my parents, like family members, my friends were like, yes, let's scram.
Right.
Because it got hard. Right. And it was like, no, it just would be easier to stay. But I knew that if I was like, no, let's just JK, let's just call it off or call it back on.
Let's call off the calling off.
Let's call off the calling off that all of those people who were supporting me would be like, no.
Right.
So then I found myself 23 years old or something, divorced or, for all intents and purposes. And I thought, oh my God, I don't think I've gotten a B, let alone here I'm making, of course, the biggest mistake you can ever make. Like everything felt so dramatic because I was 23 years old and and I was breaking all of the rules. Right. And so that year, I had set in January, I set for myself that I wanted to try a new thing every month because you guys, I was so crippled by perfectionism that I didn't even try new things because I didn't know if I could be good at them or not. Right. And there were a lot of things in my life that I naturally was good at. And so I would just kind of go to those things as opposed to trying out anything new because it felt safer and I got the praise I needed, regardless of whether or not that filled my cup or not. Right. And so my challenge that year was every month I had to try something out of my comfort zone. And that challenge was life-changing and monumental. So that was January. And then I think that this all happened with the divorce and all that, like maybe February-ish. So that was the first for me for February. Get divorced. Even little things like karaoke. I never did karaoke. Suck at singing, right? I was terrified. And then it's like, oh wait, no, karaoke is not actually about being good at singing. It's about having fun. Duh.
Right.
And so that whole year was so transformative and the growth was just unbelievable. That has continued obviously to carry me into the trajectory that I am on today.
I think it's really funny. I have two things to say. One is one of the things that my ex used to say to me, which was actually a wonderful thing, was when we were going rock climbing for the first time, like indoor rock climbing. And I was like, well, what if I'm not good at it? And he was like, well, it'd be weird if you were, you've never done it before. And I was like, and I tell Olivia's kids that all the time. Like Weston was trying to play piano and I was like, he was like, what if I'm not good at it? And I was like, well, if you were good at it, we'd have to like call TV shows and like get, it'd be like creepy and weird if you were really good at piano from the first shot. And the other thing is they always say, I've heard a lot, especially like postdoc programs for psychiatry and psychology and therapy, that research is me search, right? Like it's all about like whatever you go into is like whatever you are trying to figure out. And I, as well as I know you, obviously our working together is more about me. And so I don't know a lot of the story. And it's funny because I wonder, like, I think about when I was coming to you and it's so similar, I think, like in the way that you are and the way that you are. And I knew that we were similar. I knew that like you have the scientific mind and the creative mind. And that's something I also have. And that's an unusual combination. But the way that you're talking about it, the way you're talking about the failure, and I've never gotten a B in anything. And now I've failed this thing. And the idea of being like, well, this is the choice that I've made. And like, it's fine. I guess this is what people do. They live with their choices. And also that moment of being like, and I'm done. Like, and goodbye. Like, it's funny for me to listen, like thinking back through the work we've done together. You must have been sitting there like, you know, when I came to you the first time, I was like, I don't want you to tell me that I need to leave him. And you were like, I would never do that. I could never do that. It's not my place. It's not my, and, but you've just been like, just like watching.
I'm like, I would never do that, but you'll be doing it real soon. So
the first time I called you after I left him, you were like, I think that we can cancel this week. I have a feeling you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think you got it, girl. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
So that cracks me up.
So did you move out of your condo? What was like the next step there?
So we lived together for a little while, which was awkward, which was fun though, because I just threw myself more into like all of the other things that I was doing, work and school, and I was hardly home anyways. And then eventually he moved out. My cousin was a lawyer in the state we were living in. So he just it was, we didn't have kids. We had a dog, but I got custody. And, it was easy peasy. And then things kind of unraveled. And suddenly I was free to try all of these things and not just free from the marriage, but free from this idea of who I was supposed to be, right? Because in my mind, I'm like, well, I already failed, air quote, failed at that. So holy shit, what do I want, right? Who do I want to be? What do I want to do, right? I can tell you I've never stayed out later as many days in a row, like at bars with like all the stuff I never did when I was so busy being responsible and perfect. I was like, this is fun. Let's do this. This is crazy. And it's like, no, actually I'm a morning person. I don't want to go 4 a.m. What the heck am I thinking?
But you have to try to see you, right? You got to like feel those boundaries out.
Absolutely. And I felt all the boundaries out. It was a delightful time, right? It was so fun. No, and it was so oddly freeing that had nothing to do with the marriage, that had everything to do with the expectations I had for myself.
Right. I was going to ask, like, how did going through a divorce, which is culturally one of the biggest failures, air quotes, right, that we say to people, and as this good girl from the time you were born, that must have shaken you to your core a little bit.
You know what? It probably should have more. I think the initial, my own personal grief of mourning what I thought my life was going to be like. And I think I had always known I wanted to be a mom, that I wanted kids. And I think that was the biggest thing, because I thought, oh, well, I tried the marriage thing and it didn't work for me. So that's really sad, right? Because I really wanted all this. Again, I was 23 years old. I mean, could you think outside the box just a little bit here? But I had such support of everyone, almost too much, almost to the point of they're like, yeah, that was a terrible match. I'm like, well, thank you. Now I feel like an idiot.
Yeah.
Thank you. But and then as I get more, as time went on and I kind of got more enlightened, it was like, no, this was so much a part of my path, right? Like I had to have this, and I had to have this such a big failure in this way so that I couldn't skirt around it, right? So that I couldn't pretend or hide it under the rug or any of that stuff, which ultimately was so free.
Yeah, I almost feel like that your shackles were released by this, right? It was like a genie getting the cuffs off, right?
Yeah.
I think that for us, like former good girls too, that so worry about what society thinks of us, whether we know it or don't know it. Like I thought I was like throwing my middle finger up to society the way I was living my life, but I was so concerned about what people thought of me. And I can tell you, like the day that I left my ex, I felt the same way. It was like, well, I guess I screwed up in like kind of the biggest way you can screw up, right? Like I ended an engagement. I kind of can't care what people think anymore.
No.
Like, at this point, they're going to think what they're going to think. So I'm just going to keep riding that because they've all already decided that I'm crazy, and I'm just going to ride that out. And that's been such a big piece of just not caring what people think.
Yeah.
And it's constant. It's a constant process of reminding yourself not to care.
It is. And anyone who's listening, like, I just want you to know that you can have that level of freedom, like today. You don't have to go through some big public thing. You can just take your own shackles off and then not give a shit. And it's amazing. Right.
Life-changing,
which then we all have to do. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I have had to learn these lessons, and then you have a layer, and then you go deeper, and then you're like, have I not learned this already? But then there's another, like I'm working on probably the 100th iteration of this same lesson right now. 100%. But if that hadn't happened so young, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so thankful, right? Like some people are 50 and wake up one day and they're like, oh shit, this is not for me. It's like, yay, thank you. Okay. And it's so funny too, how quickly that became just fodder at a dinner party, right? Like, oh, I was married before. Oh, this is my second husband. And people are like, what? That's crazy. And it's like, oh, I'm a badass. Thank you.
Which is funny because 50% of people get divorced, right? So every other person is divorced.
I know it.
A lot of people have first marriages in their early 20s. A lot of people that they, just it's a thing. So you found yourself, what happened career-wise? You were finishing up your program.
Yeah, so I finished up my master's program. I think then we get into when I met my current husband. I say current husband, but like my
husband.
Your husband. There's no way to say that.
Well, we'll see how he is today is the answer to that question. Day to day.
You choose each other every day.
Stories.
Yeah.
And I want to preface
stories is
I was going to say, preface this by this is the best meet cute story. So everybody take a sip of your coffee. Get ready. What? Well, your story is great too.
I'd like to say, I mean, I think, I'm competing in that.
This is a very rom-com. It's very rom-com.
It is. It's such a great story.
So yes, go ahead, Christine.
So keeping everything in mind, right? Everything that I just described. And I had sworn off men for any sort of commitment ways, right? Ever. And I was coming back at the time. I was living in Michigan, and I was driving back home to where I lived out of state. And I had stopped at a rest area, and it was funny because I got out of the car and there were these like people posing by the Indiana sign at the rest area, which I thought was hilarious because I'm like, what the heck are you doing? But they were trying to take a picture. And this is back in, it's terrible. I don't even know what year this was, 2009 or something. I don't know. I didn't even have a smartphone. Like they were trying to take a picture. And so I hopped out of the car and I was like, oh, do you want me to take your picture? They said, yeah. And then talked to them a little bit. They were like med students from Chicago, and they were just traveling, and I'm like, oh my God, that's adorable. And then I was like, I wonder what it's like to be a med student in Chicago. Went into the bathroom, came back out, and started my car, and it wouldn't start. And I was like, what the heck? I just stopped for gas like 30 minutes ago. What on earth is going on? And I got out of the car and I popped the hood. And I'm just like tapping on things under the hood at this point, like expert level. And this guy comes up and he says, do you need some help? He's like, I'm an idiot and I locked my keys in my car next to you. And I'm waiting for a tow truck. And I looked at him, starting to say, like, no, like, I got this, right? No. And I looked at him and I was like, oh my God. I was like, yes. Yes, I do need help, actually. So he said, well, I have a tow truck coming. So let's, we can just wait for it. So I said, okay, cool. So we sat on the curb because our cars there was like a empty space in between our cars. So we sat there and started talking. And he happened to be a med student in Chicago. And unrelated to the first group, by the way, that was a little
so weird
literary foreshadowing that happened before to, warm my mind up to the idea. But he's a med student in Chicago, also from Michigan originally. And if you haven't had this experience, it's hard to describe, but it's just like, oh, I know you, right? Like our souls.
There you are.
Each other. There you are. I mean, we're saying the same things. I know.
It makes me cry every time I hear this story. Every time.
So we were saying like the same things at the same time. And we even went back to like our family tree. We're like, wait, are we related? Like what is actually happening here?
You do look a little bit alike.
Yeah, I know. That's what everybody says. We are not related. We all 23andMe verified that, just in case anyone's really concerned.
Great.
But
the kids are very cute, so nobody was concerned.
Yeah. So then the tow truck came and got his keys out. And except the tow truck had a keg in the back instead of jumper cables. And so it actually could not fix my car. Now Greg, it's my husband, Greg, in case anybody
Dr. Greg. Yeah.
Dr. Greg. So he then is like, okay, I'm like, oh, well, you got your keys. Like, good luck. It was nice meeting you. He's like, yeah, it's getting dusk on Sunday in a random rest area in Indiana. He's like, yeah, I'm definitely not going to leave you here like alone. So he starts asking people for jumper cables. Now, at this point, I remember that a couple of years before, my dad gave me mandatory jumper cables as a Christmas present. And so they were in my car, but I had already forgotten about them. And it felt too late since he was already like checking out the whole parking lot to tell him. So I didn't. So he found someone, jumped in my car, and then I was like, okay, well, right. So we're on the sidewalk, and I was like, well, he's like, well, you should really take my number in case, you break down on the way home or you need something. And I was like, okay, smooth. And I said, well, I really feel like I owe you a drink because you just rescued me. And he said, he's like, okay, sounds good. So I'm like, well, let me go. This is the part I made some poor choices, but that's okay.
It worked out.
I listened to my intuition.
You made some choices.
I made some choices that other people could see as not great, but for me, they felt very inspired and they were great. It was my little brother's graduation that weekend. And so I had come from the graduation ceremony, but changed into like scrubby clothes, right? To drive home, to drive like, how many ever hours. And so I was like, oh my God, well, let me go put some jeans on and then we can go stop at a bar on the way home. Cause we were both heading kind of to our respective places in the same direction. And so I'm like, okay. So I left my car running with all of my possessions in it with a perfect stranger while I went in to change into some jeans in the rest area. And
there's nothing creepy about Greg though. Like
there really isn't. I know.
No, there's nothing. Like I would do it too.
I know. You can just feel he has such a good soul that you're like, this is fine. It's good. It's fine. So I come back out and then I'm like, wait, we are literally in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. I have no idea where we're going to go. I said, but we're both poor grad students and my parents loaded me up with all like the graduation party leftovers, like all the wine and the food. Why to my place where I live alone and we can like literally just, I don't know, have a glass of wine. Great. Sounds great. And so it was funny because we both called our moms on the way, like from our cars or like the rest area to my place. And both of the moms after were like, oh yeah, this is it. We know it. Like, and my Nana was there and my mom and Nana are like, my Nana's like, how do you know it's not a serial killer? And I was like, oh, I'll ask him. So we get out of the car in my parking lot and I was like, okay, well, how do I know that you're not a serial killer? And Greg said, well, he hands me his phone. He's like, well, you can call my mom. She'll vouch for me. And I was like, oh, that is so funny. You can't be funny in a serial killer at all. Like that's not a trait of a serial killer. And my mom even said, she's like, I hung up the phone and thought, you know what? If she dies tonight, she's going to die happy. And that's okay. I was like, as a mother, I appreciate that freedom that you had to give me. And so he said, well, you know what? Let me just help you at least unload this stuff. And then you can decide. And of course I was like, no, so long story long, we like talked for hours and hours and hours. And then when I went down to walk him back to his car and to check, because I had class in the morning to make sure that my car started, we're in the parking lot and I'm like, well, I don't know what we do because I've never like done this before, but like, do we like hug or shake hands? And then he just interrupts me and like grabs my face and gives me like the best movie kiss in the middle of the parking lot ever. And I was like, wow, that was amazing. Like, yes. Truth be told, I then was like, you want to come back upstairs?
I also think though that like having like you and sort of this like more neurotic, like, I don't know, what do we do? Like this hyperactive sort of bit. And then having him be like, I got this. I'm like, I got it. Like, I would think for me, which Thomas is a lot like that for me. He's like, I got it. Like, we're going to be okay. This is what we're going to do. It's a very attractive thing for somebody that has a lot going on.
Yes. And for me to be able to be to have that neuroticism external as opposed to feeling like it was internal and I had to hide it. Right. So for me to be able to be like, I'm awkward, I don't know what to do, but I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm not awkward.
Right.
This is it. And then for him to just be like, no, I'm reading the room, and he read the room. Right. And it was, so, yeah. And then he called me the next night. Like it just was. And then I think we had spent, then I would drive up to Chicago, and we spent every weekend together after that. And then eventually I moved up to Chicago too. And, you know, as fate happens, there was one PhD program I wanted to go to. And, oh, I should add that night at the rest area, the two places each of us wanted to live like separately, North Carolina and Colorado. And so, which I didn't strike me as that weird, but I'm like, there are a lot of states. So the fact that we both from the Midwest have the same two states in different areas of the country, like that's weird. So I ended up getting into my PhD program in North Carolina. And I mean, this was a terrible time anyways. He was in his last year of med school, and I was in my last year of my master's program. And so he was starting the residency interviewing and all of that stuff. And he ended up matching for surgery residency at the same place that I was accepted for my PhD. So neither of us had to choose like who went where or be long distance. Kind of like you can't do long distance with a surgery resident, like, or a PhD student. Like there's no way that would ever happen. So yeah, we both moved to North Carolina, and then he got his fellowship in Colorado, and that's where we will be forever because it's magical. But to have it just was such a whirlwind. And by the way, in my mind, the logical part of me who did come in, the logical, anxious, like she still lived there with me, right, would come up and be like, oh my God, but I can't do that. I'm not committing. I'm not. And, you know, even when he and I started dating, I said, well, I'm never getting married again. I'm not doing this. Like, sorry for your luck. And he had to repent for a lot of other men's sins. And he did so willingly, absolutely willingly. And I think that there was a lot of healing that took place in that space. Yeah. Because in my mind too, I'm like, well, the timing's off, right? This is no. I need like 5 years to heal, and I need this, and it's not okay. And it's like, okay, but that's me trying to control the situation too, right? That's me trying to, because the reason why I got married in the first place to my first husband was this is what I should do, right? To date Greg when I did was breaking that, right? Because everybody in the world was like, is it too soon? You shouldn't do that. This is what the research says. And it's like, I mean, I can't not have, this is like a freight train worth of momentum here. So I guess I'm just surrendering.
It cracks me up because like, again, making this about me. Like I had the right person to call when I was like, hi, I met somebody 11 years ago, but I'm talking to them 9 days after my engagement ended. And I think that like, this is a really serious thing. And you were like, I'm not going to say, like, you were like, it sounds good, you know, because it's so funny to hear that story. Cause it's like, you get it. If you've had that happen, the intensity that, oh, there you are. Or like the way I felt with Thomas was, this has happened in every lifetime I've ever had. I've been with this person. That was how I felt. And so it's like the timing was off. I did the good girl thing. I waited the years before we moved in together. I waited the years to get engaged. You know, I did all the right things. And then 9 days after a breakup, this person bounces back into my life. It's like, okay, I gotta go to Scotland. You know, like that's what I gotta do.
Yes, it's unbelievable. But think of the freedom that comes with that, right? When we break all of the rules because the rules were not made for us, right?
I love that. Yeah. 100%.
So you said something before I'm going to bring back. When I talk about you as somebody that changed my life and as a therapist, I tell people that you are incredibly spiritual and psychic, and that you know, I always remind people, when you look for a therapist, you have to match with them on so many levels, right? And so when I come to you and I said I had this psychic dream, or I had this moment, or I want to manifest something, you are right on board, right? Other therapists may not be. So talk to us a little bit about the manifestation journey that you had, because clearly you manifested all of these things, right? You manifested Greg, you manifested getting the residency and the program at the same place. This was not a coincidence that this stuff happened. And, you know, you've taught me a lot about manifestation, and you are a firm believer in manifestation. So I would love to hear kind of your thoughts on that and how your journey came to be around manifestation and spirituality.
Yes, absolutely. So, I have a mom who's very, she's like closet witchy, because she has all these skills, but like grew up at a time that it wasn't normal, you know? So we would low key be like, oh, I had this like weird dream that, and then this happened, or like, oh, I think I had a spirit come to me, right? Or all of this stuff. And so, there's that piece, right? There's like the spiritual connection, and then there's actually like the more active manifesting. And so I think when I was in college, she had kind of, I think she read The Secret or something and was like, hey, check it out. And so we both were on that path together. And I think the manifesting and the psychic stuff kind of was interwoven for a while, and then kind of got put on the back burner whilst I was going through things. Though it turns out she was actively manifesting situations for me, you know, to help maybe get me out of my current situation, or right, and all of that stuff. But that's a story for another day. But so I think that, and then finding people who felt like home for me, right? Like this soul tribe, this soul family, who, like the friends I mentioned from grad school, or other people. And so starting to low key dabble, but still it wasn't the time in my life, I think, to go full hog with it. And then, you know, my doc program, all that stuff got busy, blah, blah, blah. And it kind of falls by the wayside. And then it would cycle back up, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I can journal, or I can, and I'm trying to think, it's funny because I came across a journal from 2016 where it's like, I was ready. You could see like I could have blown the top off of everything with all of that back in 2016. And then I got pregnant again, and then I was sick again. And then it was like, oh no, it's not the time. Right. And it wasn't about the pregnancy. It wasn't about any of that stuff, but it was okay, look at her. She was there and she was right on the surface, but it wasn't time yet to come into this space. Right. So if we fast forward, after I graduated from my doc program, I worked in North Carolina, and then we moved to Colorado. And that's when I got a job as a professor. And of course I just found out I was pregnant with my third kid. Greg was in fellowship. We were poor as shit, living in Denver, suddenly, you know, not paying North Carolina childcare prices, but, you know, Colorado childcare prices, being the primary wage earner and the primary caregiver to two little kids who were like less than a year and 3 years old. It was insane. Right. So the stress was so high, and we were just getting by, and trying to make it work. And then, I got this job that was, I was a professor, and I was like, oh, I love it. Cause I had done adjunct before, and it was like, this is it. I love it. And it was remote. So I could still, you know, I could be flexible with the kids, and dream job. Right. And then I found out I was pregnant like 2 months after, or like probably weeks after, accepting the job, which was hilarious. But it was okay. I was making a ton of money. Like there was a lot of stuff that had happened at my other job that my boss left. So I took over her position in interim, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, we got money, we can breathe. I've got this new job coming, like because of everything. Great. And so that was for a couple of years, and then, or maybe, I don't know, a year or two. And then we moved again. And then it was like, okay, this no longer serves me. And it was that same idea again. It's like, Christine, what are you doing? It's been 2 years. Like, and the self-conscious stuff of, am I being impulsive? Am I being reckless? Should I see this out? Should I stick this out? And, at that time, Greg now was an attending trauma surgeon. So it was like, well, I could quit and just figure out what I wanted to do. But part of me is like, well, no. Who am I? Who would I be if I left my job? Because I have a PhD and I'm a professor, and I like that when I go to conferences with you, for example, and, other dickhead surgeons are like, oh, you stay at home, Mrs. Borst. And I'm like, fuck you, dude. Am I allowed to say that?
You're good.
Swear. Sorry. It's also my favorite, but it was like, okay, like I'm a professor and blah, 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 blah. And
a doctor.
Yeah.
Dr. Borst. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's Dr. Borst to you. Okay. So, and so I feel like there's a lot of power and safety, especially in the realm with other men about that, right? Because they are so quick. I think even being a surgeon's wife, people are really quick to write you off as
a real housewife.
Right. Exactly. Which is fine. Like if that's somebody's path, I love that.
It's because it takes a lot to support that surgeon going through. So it makes sense that somebody would have to kind of be home and doing all that stuff. And it just speaks to your power and Greg's, power too, of like the way that you guys come together, that you were both going through these rigorous programs. You're both doing these things. There wasn't somebody that was like the support person at home, though I know, sometimes it ends up falling to the woman anyway, but.
Right. No, I would love a support person. Like could we get somebody else in this mix, please? That'd be great. But
I always said I wanted a wife. Like I used to feel like that. I don't feel like that anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, I do. I still feel like, I think I need like a staff, really. I just said to my friend,
that's what I want.
Yeah, right. I was like, I think I was meant to like run a household and parent. Like I was like elite London society. Like that's the vibe I'm going for, but I'm just still doing myself. It's fine. But so there was a lot of power, I think, in safety in that identity. And meanwhile, I'm like, I just want to write, I want to write and I want to draw. Like, I want to just do all this creative stuff. But I can't. And so meanwhile, my students would have these like really elaborate, or like I would draw out cartoons to like illustrate a point, or, you could see how it was coming out in the assignments I would give my students, or all of this, because I'm like, I am, again, it was such a parallel to my first marriage where I'm like, I'm dying inside. And it became so, obvious that if I was not putting the creativity in the forefront, that I was starting to like shrivel up again. Right. Yeah, I couldn't do it anymore. And so Greg was like, no, you should quit. Like you should. And I'm like, no, I'm scared. I can't do it because then what if people think I'm just this? What if blah, blah, blah. Which I realized too, it's ironic because it's the privileged position that allowed me to leap. And it's the privileged position that kept me there, because I'm like, then what if people think I'm just like a spoiled surgeon's wife, or right. and talk about manifesting. It's like, yes, but what if you were given this situation in order to make the leap easy, right? In order to have this, because it's not like we didn't struggle for most of our marriage, financially and with resources and all of that stuff. But there was still that idea of like, well, I haven't earned it, right? I need to work hard. I need to suffer greatly so that my dream can take off. And there was clearly a lot of work that I had to do with that. and the energy, and what energy am I aligning with? The energy of like, I have to, if I'm not suffering or if I'm not miserable, then I'm not working hard enough. Right. I went on a Monday afternoon. I had a really flexible schedule, and I met a friend to see Little Women, like the iteration of Little Women. This was ironically back in January 2020, if anyone remembers 2020. And there's something about Little Women, which had always been such a precious story since I was a kid. And like watching Jo and everything she went through. And I was like, I left that movie sobbing, and I was like, I have to quit my job like today. So I emailed my boss, who's a friend, and I said, I need to, can we meet? And I knew that if I didn't say why I wanted to meet in the email, that I would actually, like with the divorce, right? If people weren't holding me
Right.
accountable, I would be like, no, just kidding, just kidding. So I said, because I need to quit, but I want to talk to you about it. And so she's like, okay, like the semester was supposed to start in a week or something. And I'm like, no, end of the semester, it's fine. But anywho, so I went home and I think I quit before I told Greg. I was like, he's like, yeah, I've kind of been saying that for a while, but no, it's fine. I'm like, I just did it. Oh my God. And that was that. You'd think, I mean, I'd like to say I was, really feeling my fresh start, really into this, but just like the first time I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, oh my God. And back and forth and who am I? And then COVID hit and it was like, and this is where I think the alignment of everything comes in, right? The more we get in alignment with our authentic selves, with our true selves, with what feels right to us, despite these external rules that we feel apply to us, the easier it is to manifest the things that you're meant for. And when COVID hit, I ended up on a whim writing a book for my kids that I shared with a couple people, like on a PDF. And I mean, this is literally week 1, I think. Yeah. And it was mind blowing because it went everywhere. I mean, it went all around the world and just the PDF. And I was free, obviously. I'm like, this is just, oh my God, what the hell is going on? Everybody needs this. Or everybody, my kids need to understand if this is helpful for anybody else. And it just kept getting shared. I mean, there were like schools in India that reached out that said, could we use this as part of our curriculum? Or it was just beyond my wildest dreams, because in January, it was my dirty little secret that I wanted to write and illustrate children's books, right? Like that's what I was so afraid of the world finding out, right?
Yeah.
Like what is this like PhD therapist have any business doing writing and illustrating children's books, right?
Right.
I couldn't figure out in my mind how it all would intersect. And that is, I think, the beauty of manifestation and things like law of attraction and vibration, is that the how is none of our business.
Yeah.
All our responsibility is to figure out what feels good to me and what feels in alignment with me. And can I trust that? And then it's like, that's where the universe has the way things have played out when I can just get in alignment and trust. It's like, those stories are so much cooler than anything I ever would have written out for myself. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, a publisher reached out and asked if they could publish my book. And so, long story long, my first children's book was published before I even had left, before the semester was even done, before I had even finished out the last semester.
5 stars on Amazon. I just looked.
Thank you.
We'll link it in the show notes. Yeah.
Thank you. It was translated into multiple languages, like in YouTube, and some of it's just hard to track and I forget about it. But then it's like, oh my God, if that's not the universe saying, okay, you're good. I don't know. And it was really helpful in times where I was concerned about my, like, who am I and what do I do? And, blah, blah. So I think that then opened up, it was like time, because if you're in your creativity, you're in your feminine energy, you're in your receiving. And now it's like the universe was like, all right, full till. I started working with Ginny Gain, who is just an amazing person. She's a law of attraction coach, and had met so much growth, leaps and bounds in my understanding of even manifestation being so much more than just, this is what I want, but like, am I in vibration? Am I living my truth? Am I unpacking these beliefs that I have not even been realizing I'm holding myself to, right? To get in alignment with what's for me. And we've done a lot of Eckhart Tolle stuff. It gets really deep. And I think that my word for 2022 was magic. And it blew my mind. I think that there were a lot of trainings that came into my path where I realized, this was back in 2021, I realized that I thought the things that I do or see or know were just what most people do or see or know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because by the way, with the creative career, and this is all Olivia, like I started seeing clients, which I hadn't seen clients for forever since grad school, but it felt so different when you and I were working. I mean, that was so monumental. Like you were, and you know this, like you have been so monumental in my story. And for us to work together, and it's like, oh my God, is this what it's like when you get to find clients who are in alignment with you and not just randomly assigned at like a clinic, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, you would refer people, and that's how I met Jenny, and it's like
a lot of people.
Yeah.
We call it the cult of Christine. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Somebody said to me once, they were like, you're so generous to share your therapist or your coach with your friends. And I was like, share her. I was like, I push her on people. I'm like, sounds like your girlfriend needs a therapist. Here's her number.
It's like, yeah, every month it's like, Olivia sent me, Jenny sent me. I'm like, yeah, I love it. You guys are my.
Well, because the people in our universe I'm not gonna microphone, are aligned with us, and like, so it makes sense that they would be aligned with you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's when I moving from this idea of being a therapist and like diagnosing and billing and insurance and like to this coaching model which I think is frankly how this stuff should be, because if you are in alignment and we feel in alignment and you have a friend who you think that I want to be able to help them. Right. And I think that sometimes the mental health world, I understand why there are these rules and regulations, though I think a lot of that has started to change since COVID, because Olivia and I were meeting via Zoom way before COVID. Right.
Right.
And so I think it's evolving, but the point is like, there are people who don't have active diagnosis. Okay. So you're anxious, you're depressed. Yeah. But are you in alignment with your true self? No, of course you're depressed. You're dying inside, right? And so I
was me.
I love the freedom of the coaching model, because that allows me to then attract clients who really feel great for me, or it's like, yes. Right. Or like, you know, the irony of, oh, well, I was just going through that too last week. So let me share what I learned. And so I think with that, when I did the training, I did like a psychic workshop and was realizing all of these things that I could actually do. And I'm like, oh, I think that's when I'm doing more than therapy, right? Yes, I have my therapy theories and I have all of that stuff. And God knows 10 years of higher education that, you know, supports the tools that I use. But also I think I'm straight up just getting deep intuitive hits and reading your mind on where we need to go.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, as your client, that's way scarier sometimes. No, I mean, you know, when you look at me and you're like, I can feel, and you know, one time you said to me something like, I can feel my right hand is numb and you're not writing enough and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, damn it, I can't escape this, you know, like, so, or the yawning, you know, because my energy was stagnant. So, you know, and it's funny because I look at you and I feel like I've been on your journey with you because I came to you when you were still a professor, and watching you explode into this huge vibration of this creative artist entrepreneur, I'm like trying to remember who you were back then. And I'm like, who was that? Wasn't even the same person. Like it was truly, I mean, you've written so many children's books. You have now developed an entire creative company, you know, and you're still seeing clients. And, you know, it's so funny because on the flip side, everybody that you've brought into our orbit has also been completely in alignment. And I think that goes back to the idea of the coven, right? The idea that like, you know, and I didn't realize until, like you said, it was happening, that when you surround yourself with people who are of the same vibration with you, it is magic. And you don't realize it until you feel it. And that's a very hard thing to explain to people.
It is. And you know what? I think that people know when they feel what it feels like when they don't have it. But we've also normalized that so heavily in society, right? Like, no, you're supposed to be miserable. No, life is hard, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, but what if it was actually magical, right? What if it literally was magical and you have these weird things that happened, like at that psychic retreat, and you can hear more about this at Alchemy of the Heart podcast,
which we're going to link. Yes.
Thank you. So at that psychic workshop in the summer of 2021, what is time? This is where I'm realizing, okay, oh my God, I'm actually reading the shit out of people and all of this stuff. And I can do this. And I had no idea. We had to do a guided meditation, and we met our spirit guide. And so I met this new spirit guide, and I was like, oh, okay. And he handed me to think, all this stuff. It was so weird and symbolic, but I was like, okay, whatever. So he became my spirit guide. And when I would meditate, like I'd see him in meditation. This is probably really weird for people who are like, what the hell? But
I think
most of our audience is on board with that.
Okay. And if not, it is way more fun in this area. So you should probably just jump ship.
Yeah, join. Yep. Come on.
And so I have these months of notes and symbols and all this stuff, which as the social scientist in me kind of loves it in hindsight, because it's like, oh my God, I'm not
data. Right.
Yeah, this is data.
Spiritual data.
Spiritual data, yes. And so after all of that, like my word in 2022 was magic. And then here, lo and behold, I'm at another psychic workshop, and in walks this person, and it was like, holy shit, you're my spirit guide. Like we've been meditating together for 9 months in my meditations, and like you have tattoos on your hands of the things that you handed me in the meditation. And that's crazy. My God, what is this? Right. And so that then you're like, universe, what is happening? But it's like, no, you're in alignment. So if you're in alignment and this is coming up, then it's for you. And so there has been tremendous spiritual growth with that. And so, and that's Ellie and he and I started a podcast and all this stuff. And so you can hear more about that side of things there. But it's so funny when you have like all of this data in journals and you have these hints, you're like, this would be too crazy to make up, right? It would be too clever for me to think, it would be great to meet my husband at a rest area at the worst possible time, right? And that was pure magic, right? And so or getting married at a young age and divorced, but that actually being the best gift that I was ever given, because it put me on this trajectory of who I actually am.
Yeah.
And I guess that's life. That's where I'm at right now.
I think it's funny too, talking about alignment and connection. I told Christine this story, and I'll tell all of you now. When I was about 24, I needed to go see a therapist. And in the grand tradition of Olivia and I, she did find the therapist and call her. And I went to her for a couple months. I couldn't tell you what it was like to be in the room with that woman. The only thing I can tell you is that on my last session, when I felt like maybe I was kind of done with therapy at that moment, because, you go through phases, right? You're in and then you're out, you're in, you're out. She fell asleep while I was talking. Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, we agree. I'm boring now. That's fine. And I think I had Olivia call and say, I'm not coming back. Like, I couldn't do it. I was sitting here thinking, and I realized I've never met Christine in person. And yet I couldn't tell you, like, to me, it feels like we've been sitting in the room together, face to face, person to person, like, because we're in such alignment and energetically, and I feel so connected to you. It's never occurred to me until watching you talk just now that I was like, we've never been in the same place. I was like, oh, maybe we should post a picture of Olivia, me and Christine together. And then I was like, they don't exist.
But I want to say too, like, it's so much bigger than us, right? And that's something that's really hard for people to understand. So if you look at like just the three of us, right, and the interconnection, it was Christine who brought me to the place that I decided to speak up for myself, and then my marriage ended, and lo and behold, we founded a company that's now changing the world and helping people with their fresh starts, right? Like, if that hadn't happened, that and by the way, for listeners, I found Christine on Instagram, and I think I found you because your oldest child is the same age as my child. And I vividly remember being on Instagram when Weston was a couple months old and thinking, I'm literally going to go use the hashtag like 8 months old and follow people. And by the way, I followed you and my friend Alex, who is one of my soul people, and a couple other moms who I literally just found because of a hashtag.
Yep.
Right. And so if you're telling me that there's no universe at play here to bringing these people together, then, you know, like
also, you know, if you're telling me that people can't forge real connections on a digital space, like you can.
You know, when we talk about the universe, and my word this year is magic, and I didn't even know that was your word for 2022. So I had no idea. But, you know, it does really help, because every day I wake up and I think, well, today is going to be magic. Today it's going to be magic. But I do want to say, too, that doing all the work requires an element of vulnerability.
Oh God, yeah.
Right. So
an element, it requires a lot of vulnerability.
So I just, before we let you go, what would you say to somebody that wants so badly to have this journey on a fresh start and start this like new spiritual growth? Maybe, are there simple ways you can kind of step into your alignment that doesn't feel so scary to people who are just starting out on this brave decision making path?
First of all, it may feel scary, but feeling scared fear does not equal danger. That is something that I have to remind myself too, because oftentimes change is uncomfortable, but when we get to the point that not changing is more uncomfortable than changing, that's when you know it's time to go, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a big foundation of inner trust. Can I trust that when I feel ready, I will go? And ready doesn't mean not scared, right? Ready doesn't mean everything's in alignment. Ready means when the scales have tipped and the idea of staying stagnant feels way worse than the fear of moving forward, right?
Yeah.
Find a support system, find like-minded people. You don't need people saying, oh, are you sure? Are you careful? Right?
Yeah.
Because this is between you and your intuition. And so anyone in this space needs people who understand that that is the most sacred relationship, right? And that I can have an opinion on what I think Jenny should or shouldn't do, but what is way more important than my friend opinion, professional opinion, is what her intuition is speaking to her and respecting like the sacredness of that relationship. And so, yeah, it's going to be scary. And there may be things that we think are so vital to who we are in our lives and our identity that just don't serve us anymore. And that's okay. So can I trust that if not this, then something better, right? I have never not had something better fill that space when I'm working in alignment with what feels true to me. And I think that there's a lot of self-honesty. It doesn't even have to be like broadly. It's like, do I like this? Even walk around your house.
Yeah.
Do I like this? Does this spark joy? When I hold this mug in the morning, like, what do I feel? And we have gotten so used to shutting down everything, or these ideas like, oh, well, you're just being too fussy or too particular, or, you know, just pick out an outfit. What do we tell our kids? Just pick out an outfit. Let's go. Or here, you just wear these, but it doesn't feel right. No, just wear it. It's like, no. How can we start nourishing ourselves in what feels an energetic alignment, no matter how small? If that pen you're writing with is irritating you, find a new pen. It's important, right? All of those things are very important.
I love that.
I love that.
It's the lean into joy. And I think of what you say all of the time. The how is not your business. I tell it to everybody now. I'm like, you know, because we're so wrapped up in control, right? And control. But the how is not, but you have to have a belief of the universe. And the belief of the universe really is the belief of yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. They're connected. Yeah. I love that.
Absolutely. And just take risks. Just like, you literally, I was going to say, have nothing to lose. It feels like you do, but you don't, right? Like, what if things worked out even better than you ever imagined?
Yeah.
Then what? If you knew that was the truth, that was the rule, that was the fallback, what would you do? What would you lean into, right? It's limitless.
Yeah. And you once said to me, and I think about it a lot too, I tend to rush through. I want the end goal. I want to know I'm going to be successful and all these things. And you said, Olivia, you are walking in a botanical garden. Would you ignore all the beautiful flowers on the pathways that you're walking to just get to the end of the garden because it's the end of the place? And I think about that all of the time because there's so much magic in every day. And we are so committed sometimes to shutting our eyes and just getting to that end point, making the money and getting the next level of the house and this, that. But there's so much when we actually can stop and look at the universe from that other perspective.
Yes. And like that, I love that because it is like, are you looking for the magic in every day? And are you suspending your logical mind? Because like, God bless her, but sometimes she does not belong at the table. Like analysis and logic, and forget that.
Yep.
What if we were able to look at life through this lens of like this childlike lens or this whimsical lens or this magical lens? How would that change things, right? Yeah. What if there's no such thing as coincidence? What if it was magic, right? I love that. And I'm not saying I do this all the time. Like I get stressed, things happen, and I have to relearn this too. And then it's like I put that lens back on when I relax back into myself, and it's like, oh my God, it feels like home.
Yeah, I love that. So before we go, we have a question we ask our guests, which is, what is the best last thing you ate?
Greg and I went to Italy for 2.5 weeks in
yeah, we followed your whole journey. We were jealous.
Yeah, in August/September. And I don't think I've been satisfied by food since then.
Christine had a romantic relationship with a sandwich in Italy.
You can see the reel on Instagram. My Instagram it's real hot. No, that sandwich probably, that was like the last day. And it was so good. Like food to me is so functional usually, which is kind of sad, but I'm just like,
well, you've got 3 little kids.
Yeah. I'm like, I got, that's the artist lifestyle. Like, I just want to dig back into this project. Who cares about food? But Italy helped me slow down and appreciate the nourishment that really good food can give you.
Yeah.
I do want to say before we close off with Christine, speaking of her and Greg's trip to Italy, I know that no relationship is perfect or is anything what you see on Instagram. I'm very aware of that. But I also know that for both me and Olivia, seeing the way that you and Greg are together and just kind of like the ongoing obsession you have with each other was very inspiring. Because I had never been loved like that. I had never had a love like that. And it definitely was one of those things where you look around when you're in another relationship, you're like, oh, that's available? That's an option. And I went, with lots of help from Christine. We talked about the conversation in my episode where I went to my ex and I was like, okay, I want to have a baby at this date. And he gave me the weakest yes ever. That was because of my work with Christine. Like we were talking, Christine and I sort of came up with a plan, and then I left. I shut her down. I went to go have the conversation with him, and then I called her back. Like that was all Christine. So much of where I've been able to get to was because of my working with Christine, and so much of my being able to go into my relationship with Thomas in a very different way than I would have, and be able to work with him and create this sort of observant self of myself is because I knew that there were better things out there because yours and other relationships that I saw, but it's honestly so rare to see a relationship like that.
Yeah.
Often when we see it on social media, you can sort of tell it's forced,
right?
Or like for the social media, but with you and Greg, it's so sort of like constant and passive. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't pretend it's not there.
And it's playful,
but like, and when you see pictures of them, you're like, those two are like obsessed with each other. And it's amazing because you don't get to see it a lot. And, it allowed me to go find my person that I'm completely obsessed with and who's completely obsessed with me, and like find a love that I just never even knew was a thing that was on the shelf that I could buy, and going, like the idea of going on a trip to Italy with somebody for 2 weeks was not something that I would have like an attractive idea before. And now I'm like, I'll go anywhere in the world with him. So I just want to say, I appreciate that. I appreciate the way that you sort of in this really like non-pushy way, like share your love, and it's beautiful. And I'm glad you guys were able to allow the sandwich into the relationship too.
Right. Yeah. We opened up our relationship with sandwich,
I understand that.
Well,
I love sandwiches.
And I think that, yeah, it's what you said. Absolutely. And I am a totally different person than I was when we met, right?
Yeah.
He saw parts of me that I was not ready to see, that I couldn't see. And now I feel like I have far surpassed that. And we talked about that recently. Like we have both changed and evolved so much. We get annoyed because kids and work and stress and stuff, right? Or like, oh my God, you're chewing, right? Or like whatever it is. But ultimately, I think when we have time to reconnect and step back, it's like, wait, we know that there is no better person that I want as my life partner, right? Like as my family. There is literally no one who would be better for me in that space.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, so we've got lots of growth and changes, and that's terrifying sometimes, but what do we know to be true about us, right? About this connection that we have that is so otherworldly too, right? Like, so it's complex, and then sometimes shit hits the fan, but you're like, okay, we got this, we're in this together.
But I also think too, from a single person's perspective, that I lost all faith, and I'm still working on this, but I lost all faith that men could even like women. Right? I lost all faith that men could even want to be near a woman or enjoy taking a photograph with a woman or enjoy sex with a woman, any of that. Right. And so, when I look at Greg's Insta, I mean, just the other night, Greg posted about you, and I showed Jenny, and I'm like, this was so sweet. And it wasn't from a place of like, like Greg is a very busy man. He does not care, I'm sure, about posting for accolades on social media. He's sharing a beautiful picture of his wife on Instagram because he's genuinely in love with his wife. And that level of vulnerability, and also, again, going back to not giving a shit what other people think, is such a refreshing thing. So for the single people listening, and for me, who's still working on this, who came out of a really not healthy relationship, there are men who really do love the women that they are with. And I think you have to see that to believe it, because otherwise you truly do not believe it. But it just major thank you to being vulnerable and honest with your relationship, because it is healing people in a way that you didn't intend. So, sandwich aside, but
because it's in alignment and it's your truth and you're just living it. And that's the reality, right? When you are living and it goes for you too, Olivia, like you are living in alignment and your truth, and you are inspiring people as well. It's a different kind of thing, but when you are like living your truth, it's just going to be good. It's good for you. It's good for the universe.
Yes. Yeah. And even when you can't figure out what that looks like, right? Like there's been a ton of stuff in the last year that it's like, what does this even mean? Like, how do I make sense of everything? And to be in a marriage with someone that you're like, no, we can both live our truths and evolve as a couple into that truth, because we know that we're in alignment. We know that our paths are still going to be connected.
Yeah.
Safety in that, right?
Well, and you respect each other very much. That's a big piece of this.
I just got goosebumps when you said that. I think that may be the most important thing, because I respect, even if I don't like it, I'm like, I want 5 more puppies. Why can't we get them? Right. Or, like same for me, I do some real crazy stuff, you guys. And he's just like, yeah, no, I get that. Right. Because ultimately I trust him to make the best decision for him and for us. And he trusts me. There's not like this parenting, are you capable? No, I know he is capable as shit. And that's all I need to know. Right.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Trust is huge.
So, what is next for you? What's coming up this year for Christine? What can we support you in?
Well, I just released a new book, which is my word of this year. I'm looking at the link because that I love that I don't know the name of it. My word for this year is wild. And for me, that's connecting with my inner authentic self, right? Like not the domesticated version who I think I should be for the world, but like, who am I actually? And that's terrifying, by the way. If I thought magic was scary, wild, it's going to be a bold year, right? Because I need to be true to myself above all others. And by the way, when we're true to ourselves above all others, those who are meant for us in the relationships and the family and all of that, like they come and they are better for it, right? But I just released a book called Atrocious Love, a book of poetry for gently disturbed romantics, and you can get that on Amazon. It's filthy, guys. It's pure filth. And I adore that. I just read about like the spiritual in the book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, which is an amazing book, by the way. I just read the chapter about, even sexual humor. There's something really spiritual about that and humor. And I'm like, my inner wild, she is a dirty girl, and we are talking about it, right? And like ridiculous and goofy, and even like some of the organ art that I have a lot of like penis puns and all that, and those sell out like crazy around here. And so it's like, okay, what if I could just be my inner wild? And if this sounds funny or humorous or sexy or hot or whatever, like, let's go there, right? Like, let's write that poetry and publish it. I know, it's some of it I'm like, oh, that's dark. I went to some dark places, and I'm here for that too. So I think there's just going to be a lot more of that. I think that people are going to see more of my work be more in alignment with who I authentically am this year.
Well, thank you so much for being here. As always, we are obsessed with you, and we're so proud of your journey and the way you inspire people. And, we wouldn't be here literally without you.
No. Oh my God. You guys know I could cry thinking about you too. Like, oh my God.
We both wouldn't be here in our mother's and our childhood home.
Building a startup. No.
Yeah.
No. So thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty and being your authentic self, because you are, truly the embodiment of a fresh start journey. Seriously. And all of the magic that can come from it, which is a fresh start journey should be full of a lot of magic. And we're just super honored that you've been here today sharing it.
Thank you. I love you guys so much. I'm so proud of you. And thank you so much for having me.
We won therapy.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here, and we're proud of you. Until next time, brave one.
A Fresh Story is brought to you by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to start again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at freshstartsregistry.com/podcast.